Hi guys, Gosselin here, and I got my update number 3 on my Stuka, which is almost practically all painted. So let's take a look. Alright, well, here's the underside, and here is the top. Probably won't be able to see too well, I don't think, with the camera, so I only take a moment to get a few close-up slide shots. Alright, well, it came out pretty well, and I'm very happy with the results. Definitely it was a journey in the build, but I think I overcame a few hurdles, and I really just am pretty happy with it for a lot of different things and reasons. So, where do I begin my story of this painting process? It was definitely intimidating. At first you think the Splinter camouflage is an easy process because you're just dealing with straight lines, and the paintings, it's unlike doing freehand German camo schemes or anything with a curve in it with a freehand with the airbrush. You know, that's definitely harder and takes more practice and discipline. But you know, you think, don't take it for granted that just doing straight edge tape work is easy. It does have its own challenges. What happens is your model becomes a mummy, you know, from the Tales from the Crypt stories of just tape and masking tape. I'll have to show you pictures, but it looked awful. Didn't look like anything, but clearly when the tape all comes off, it looks pretty good. So let's start from the beginning of the story. So at one point I had no paint on it, and I didn't know what to do. I got a little shocked because I wasn't too sure how my panel lines were going to come out. So I figured, you know, start on the bottom first, because most likely most people will just see the model from the top. So that's where I began, and that's always the process with the model's aircraft, is which side do you paint first? Do you go from the top first and then paint the underside? I think it really doesn't matter overall whether you start from the bottom or the top. I think it depends on where your demarcation or masking line is going to be, because when I started painting the blue first, and I just went from that. But when I was having difficulties was masking around right along here and these little things, that became a challenge, and I was thinking maybe it would have been easier to paint from the top. But I just stayed with the model and just continued moving along, and in the end it still came out okay. So yeah, top, bottom, flip a coin and do both and see what happens. So that was that. One thing that was a problem though is that the Stuka, you have the landing struts, and they're not the blue, they're the green. So I had to make little tape boots so that I can mask them, because I think that's what I painted first. I painted these first, and then I masked them, and then I painted the blue. And that wasn't too bad. And then once the blue was all painted, I just masked off for my the yellow. I'm not sure. I think these denote squadron leaders or some kind of rank. I'm not too sure. Maybe somebody could make a comment on my video. But I just took some tape and masked it, and then I took some more blue tape and made a wider patch. I don't want any overspray. Again, yellow is not a great color. You don't want it too thin because it tends to spit, at least with my experience in my airbrush, but maybe with yours it's different, I don't know. But I did have some little spits, you can see them, but it's okay. The hardest part was the yellow stripe. because at first you're like, oh, just take some tape and wrap it. However, geometry begins to work against you because you're working with a spear and it's also tapered, so your tape isn't going to be straight, it's just going to follow a curve. And I tried it a couple times trying to get it straight by taking my razor blade or scissors and making an arch in the stripe of the tape, and I just wasn't getting a match on both sides. So it was a lot easier to just take really thin strips of tape, very thin, and that way just wrap it, because you can manipulate it to keep the straight line. And I did is I just put tape on the edges, and then I just took silly putty and just filled the middle and left the tape hanging out as an edge. So here's a picture to illustrate what I just talked about. Well, I hope that was helpful. It came out okay. As you can see, it's not evenly straight. It's got a little curve, but you know, first time, and I'm not going to complain at all. Also, with my royal blue, I forgot the royal blue doesn't end where I wanted it to end kind of where the tail wheel is, but I can just go with a paintbrush and just paint it in. In the excitement of painting, I just forgot to do that. I was going to put a little bit of putty right there, but that's not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. So we talked about the struts, the blue, and once that was done, it was just a matter of masking everything. So I put my little boots on. I kept them on throughout the whole painting process, and then I just took tape and I put an edge all the way around the wings, and also with the ailerons I put one in the middle just in case there was a problem with paint spraying over. And once that was done, then I started taping the fuselage, and that was actually pretty well. The only area that was difficult was right where these little things are, and that's always a question, you know, these little instrument pieces. Do you wait until it's all painted and then install them, or do you put them on first and then paint it? I left my little knobs for my ailerons off. They were just getting away and they would probably break off. I kept these on because they wanted a really strong glue for them, but in hindsight maybe I would have probably left them off and put them on at the end. Again, it's personal taste and whatever method you want to do. So yeah, and then I just continued my taping and taping under here and masked it. Yeah, we'll talk about the horizontal stabilizer later, because that was a nuisance. And once it was all masked, I just started the process of the main body. And here we have the two-tone. What colors did I use? For the lighter green shade, I used a mixture of NATO green, XF67, and yellow, XF3 Tamiya colors. I just mixed them. I know the magazines. I don't know what the ratio is when I mix my colors. I just sort of mix them. That's why I really don't talk about painting in my channel, because I think I would just confuse everybody. I don't really follow any set rules. I just kind of go with the flow. So it probably makes me a very bad teacher in that regards. But maybe in the future I might talk a little bit about my painting processes. Dark color, what was that? That was a Tamiya black-green XF27 with a mixture of white XF2. And again, I'm using Tamiya colors, but you know, obviously there's a dozen other products out there, Vallejo and Monomaster series from Testers, enamels. They also have acrylics out now and life colors. So there's a lot, and you know, pick a color that works for you. I didn't follow the standard, you know, RLM series colors. Again, I wanted to kind of change up the tone of the colors just for display purposes and seeing some artistic artistry, I guess, in tones. Alright, I hope I haven't lost you yet. So now you're painting the top, and you have to ask yourself, well, what color do you want to do first? I did sit there for a while and I thought about it. You look at the call-out sheet, the diagram with your model, and at one point it's like, well, which area has the most surface area of paint? Is it the light green or the darker green? And I thought about it for a little bit, and I think it's almost pretty equal. So there's no really easy, I don't think there's really an easier way to go about it. You just pick one. One's going to be the whole base color. So what I did is I picked the light green shade. I made my mix, threw it in the airbrush, painted the whole thing. Let it dry. So it's acrylic, so I only let it dry for a good an hour. And once that was done, I started my masking process. Where did I begin? I believe I started on the tail. And I just started taking my Tamiya strips right here and making areas. What I did was I just masked everywhere that was going to be light green. I put tape on, and then anywhere that had no tape was going to be the dark green color. And that for the most part worked out well. The difficulties was working underneath the horizontal stabilizer was a pain, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So once the tail was done, I went on and I started here. So I just made some tape edges, and you can either what I did was I made my edges with the Tamiya tape, and then I filled the center with the painter's 3mm blue tape, and that way I had a demarcation. I knew which area was going to be green, and help me illustrate where I was going with the painting process, because at some point, like I said, it's just tons of tape everywhere. And so I just made the process. I just started with each patch, boom, 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 and that was done. So, and that was it. And one of the things too is give yourself a break. If you need to do one wing, tape it, walk away, do it tomorrow. I did it all in one shoot. Like, this whole painting process was done in one evening. Probably spent a good 5 hours on it. That was me. I just wanted to get it done. But I definitely would recommend, if you need to chill out and go do something else, just do it in parts. It's not gonna hurt the model. So once the wings were covered and the tail was covered, and then the fuselage, now if you can see off to I had those nice sharp points over on the fuselage, and that was pretty cool. So again, just started taping, and I just did just grab your scissors. I made my angles cuts just with scissors and put them in. Probably it'd be easier if I had a camera and videotape as I worked, but for me that would be very stressful, so I'd rather just talk about it. And but yeah, I just take each edge was a separate piece of tape and covered it. The same thing with the front of the fuselage here. So let's just I did take some pictures as I went, so maybe that'll help illustrate a little bit about what I'm trying to convey here. So let's take a moment to look at some masking shots. Yeah, so that was a lot of masking tape, and I don't know if you saw it in the pictures, but for the cockpit I just took some paper, cut it to shape, and I just wrapped it inside, and I had really no major concerns with overspray at all. So we've talked about everything except the headache, which was the fuselage horizontal stabilizer. I think if I were to work on this again, or any future aircraft models, I would consider installing the horizontal stabilizer after. It becomes tricky when you're working with these little bar things, because there's masking processes involved, and you got to get inside there with the airbrush. It was tricky. I think definitely these are easy pieces to install, so the rudder and the horizontal stabilizer, I probably could have just painted them a side off from the plane, and then once everything was painted, just glue it on. It would have been a lot easier. But as you can tell, you can do it and be successful at it. It's just, you gotta be very patient with yourself. The only areas I do have a touch up, I have a little bit of overspray on the bar on the inside, but nothing too major. Again, I'll just take the Harry stick and just feather in some paint. And once everything was really dry, I just started pulling it all off. And this is what I ended with. So it came out pretty good. I'm very impressed with the model, and I'm glad it came out. And the rescribed panel lines are not that bad. I figured it'd be a lot worse, but it came out okay. Definitely there's a few areas where I got a scratch or a gouge, but not bad at all. What I did do is, before I started painting, this was a great process. I think what I might want to do is my next Tools of the Hobby video, I do want to talk about sanding. I've been kind of hemming and hawing about doing it because it seems like it is talked about quite often in the YouTube community. There's a lot of sanding discussions, so I feel like, what more could I really add to it? But I think I could add a few things that aren't talked about too much. So one of the things I want to talk about was the concern about, when you're working with these older kits, yeah, there is a considerable amount of filling involved, hence the filler queen. But I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I mean, there is no seam line anywhere in the fuselage. The only place where you can really tell, I had a little on the bottom, I got a little lazy with the sanding, but there's like a few bumps. There's two here, and there's one up front. But for the most part, it's smooth. There's no seam, and that was really beautiful. But it did take some work, and the first couple times didn't really go well. And this is where I wanted to get into sanding, which I'll talk about later. But the whole idea is you really do have to prime a model like this. I didn't. I just did it, and luckily it wasn't a big deal. But if you really want to have err on the side of caution, prime it in a color, because when you prime it, all the little bumps of flash or putty is going to show up really well, more so than plain plastic. And then from there you can take your sanding equipment and really start sanding the seams and all the little blemishes. And that's what happened here, because when I started the stripes, that was the first paint that went on. I painted it a khaki, like a dark yellow, and as a immediate primer. I don't like painting yellow right on plastic. I want to have some kind of primer to give it something to bite into. And what I noticed was the top, that there was a little bit of putty there, so then I just took my yellow and I went right along the whole top, and I saw a lot of gap, places where the putty didn't quite, wasn't smooth. And that's a great, I mean, that's how you do it. You learn, and from there I just went and took my sanding paper and sanded it nice and smooth again, and then I slapped in some more putty, and then sanded it again smooth, and it came out really nice the second time. So here's a few shots of the filling adventure. Okay, so there it is. came out okay. And so where am I now with this build? I guess at this point it's I'm going to have to gloss coat it and then look into laying down some decals. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to try the stock decals that came with it, and we'll see what happens. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I'll have to pick up something from the aftermarket collections. Yeah. And then once that's done, it's just a matter of slapping on the canopy and the rear machine gun. Also, what I have to say lastly is I did have a little bit of the wing walk. I did pull one off, the aluminum one, because I had to put masking tape over it. I had no choice. So tried really hard to not yank it, so I gently, and it still came off. So I have a little bit of a pull, but not much I can do about it at this point. What else can I talk about Splinter camouflage was when you lay down the tape, you want as much as possible to prevent bleeding through the two tones. How will that happen? Sometimes the tape edge may lift. So when you put it on, press it down with a Q-tip, you know, a hair bud thing, or what I used was a rounded tipped instrument, like the end of your paintbrush, or maybe a rounded edge of a toothpick, and I just went along the seam, and just really to ensure that that tape is down, because if it's lifted up a little bit, you may get a little bit of overspray crossing over. And luckily I can't really find any. There's one or two spots where the other problem is, if you go heavy with the paint, you're going to build up an edge along the tape, and that's a pretty common situation that does happen. I think the only place that happened was, I think on my yellow stripe, I got it a little bit. Just take some really, like, 1000 grit sandpaper and just gently hit those little areas. To prevent it, just don't go heavy with the paint. Just hit it with spurts, and you should be all set. Just go on very gently. Oh, and I do have a last statement or a comment, because again with sanding, when I had to go back and sand, I had to sand, and I wanted it really smooth, so afterwards I put it under the sink to wash off those areas and make sure my rescribed panel lines were free of dust and debris. Unfortunately, what happened was underneath my my bomb brackets, they're glued in and there's no filler at all on the edges. I left it open because looking at pictures it looked like there was a natural gap or seam line there, so I left it. What happened though is when I was washing underneath, some water built up underneath and it made a pool, and when it came to painting the wing, the airbrush, that air went right in, because like there's a little gap hole there, it went right in and it pushed water all over the wing, all over, it went everywhere, and that was the problem. It was like, what happened? And luckily I stopped airbrushing and I took a hair dryer and I just got the water dry. So my recommendation always, if you're going to wash your model before painting, make sure it's thoroughly dry and do an inspection. Is there any place where water may pool, or the airbrush is going to blow water out or something? So that will just save a future headache. Okay. Yep. Finally, masking, taking the masking tape off, it's crazy because there is an unbelievable amount of tape that is going to come off. And how do you do that? In most cases, you're going to have laps where you put down a strip of tape, you put down another one. So you can just take a little bit of, I took a toothpick and I just kind of lifted where I knew there was underneath there was tape, and just lift it off, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it. The only places where it could be difficult was some of your initial pieces. It might be just on paint itself, and that is always tough, because if you use a toothpick, you're going to chip the paint most likely. So hopefully there may be a natural lift, and if you have really fine tweezers with a nice tip, that helps to pull it off. There may have been one or two spots where I did use my X-Acto blade. Just be very careful you don't scratch the paint underneath to pull it off, and it came out okay. My only thing is this blue tape. I'm beginning to, it's a lot more tackier than the Tamiya tape, and I used it for convenience. It did lift a little bit of paint. You can barely see it, but right along the airline there's a little bit of spots of paint that lifted. But my thing was, don't press too hard on this tape because it will lift. It could be a problem. So I know they sell wider Tamiya tape where it's wider, so I would recommend go with that as much as possible to prevent that tape from lifting. Okay, I really hope I haven't confused you guys. Let me know if you have. I'll try to explain some more, but I think it was okay. So last parts will be painting the wheels, putting on my bomb and bomb cradle and the other smaller bombs, and the canopy and the machine gun. So this will be the last update video. The last one will be just the reveal, which should come up sometime in the next few weeks. This was an exciting build on a lot of levels for me. It was a first in a lot of different things. Rescribing panel lines, really working with putty, and getting seam lines really nice. And this is just a great example of taking an older kit and really just making it a super kit, you know. And that's the beauty of the hobby. Not saying that the new kits are bad. Never take what I'm saying that new kits are bad. I am not. I own new kits, and to be honest, I purchased a kit a couple weeks ago, a P51 Academy build, which it's pretty cool. It's a new build. The tooling, it's amazing. There's almost no filling involved at all, so that's beautiful. To build a model without all that filling it's heavenly. But to go back and build an older kit and make it shine, I think is equally just as fun if you want to put the work into it. No joke, you know, you do have to roll up your sleeves and get cracking, like I've been saying all along. But for me, my personal taste in model building, it's been rewarding. Definitely a few moments of asking myself, why am I doing this? This is a lot of work. But it came out okay. And yeah, it's hard work, but some of it's, I think it's the factor of intimidation. It's really not as bad as you think. It's just time consuming. That's the work, which isn't hard. And don't get into thinking, oh, it's going to come out crappy. Don't, because you do that, you'll never see the model through, and you'll never really know what happened. And to be honest, so what if it came out yucky? I do that all the time, and I learn from it, and that's part of the journey of model building. They're not always going to be great builds, and you know what? I bet you there's a lot of mistakes on this, but for me, the things learned versus what little errors I made, the things learned is certainly way up here. It's higher. Alright, I think I've talked a lot, and I need to stop talking. So, closing thoughts. Really don't have too much. I just want you guys to keep on building, have fun, and model on.